That should be better. Muted for the second. Should be good. Hold up. Like watching myself talk without the mic on. That should be better. There you go. Sweet. All right, guys. Sorry for the delay. Welcome to the official week 1. So hopefully, for those that are like kind of here, like watching and stuff like that, like last week, right, was a more of a just kind of introduction slash kind of like, welcome back type of thing. I'd been off for the last like 2 months. But this week, right, we're starting the first official, form language for world building, right? So it's a very long title. Basically, what happened was in the voting for the topic that we're kind of going for. World form language and world building were tied, right? So luckily with those two ideas, I was able to combine them pretty easily. So we can make something kind of fun with that. But just as a heads up, in the future, I won't always combine things like that. If they're like completely polar opposites, doesn't always work. But like a lot of times, like whenever I'm setting up topics for the upcoming like month. What I try to do is do 2 design things and 2 quality things like rendering slash, some sort of technique like lighting or something like that. So just kind of have a heads up for anybody that's, in the live stream plus, part of that voting, or anybody that, is kind of wondering how these topics are generated, right? So, but with that in mind, today is week 1. So we're going to be kind of talking about the first initial steps, right? And this is actually probably the most important week when it comes to, actually designing, right? What I've found as I've, kind of like progressed through the years, like when I first started, I would kind of like look up a reference. I'd spend 30 minutes, or whatever. And then I would like just kind of start, right? So if my day was an 8-hour day at work, right? I would, first 30 minutes to an hour, look up some reference, and then 7 hours of painting, right? That's, that sounds pretty normal. And then as I was progressing through like the years, right, that proportion started changing a lot, like a ton, because now I'll spend like 5 or 6 hours looking up reference, and then like 2 hours painting, right? Because I am getting faster at painting. I'm getting faster at doing things. But the ideas aren't getting better if I don't spend the time to actually figure it out and actually learn how to do it, right? Something that I'm going to talk about today is, I guess some of the mindsets behind the reference board, right? We're going to do a little bit of like painting and, actual like, doing of things. But that was kind of like what last week was about, right? So if you haven't seen last week's episode, it's the one that's episode 00, and basically it was just me kind of going through a process. So because I usually don't spend that much time on quality during these streams, I kind of like use that time to kind of like break some of those down. This week we're gonna be focusing a lot on like kind of what and why I do the things that I do, and what are some of the pitfalls that you kind of run into as students, or even as early professionals, even like mid-level professionals. So we'll kind of talk about that, and then why I lay things out a certain way. It's very particular, it's very deliberate, and it's kind of it's developed like that for a reason, right? So but I think we should be okay. Audio looks good. Sweet. All right, guys. So, let's talk about it, right? So, for those that don't know, right, I usually make a reference board that looks very similar to this. And like my reference boards usually like are just the distilled down version of like all the images that I'll gather, right? So, for example, like I will oops, let me turn that down a little bit. I'll kind of like grab like a ton of images where it's like, oh yeah, there's like 5 or 6 espresso machines, 5 or 6 images of Stonehenge, or in this case, looking at the references that I have here, like 5 or 6 images of crows, and I'll just have like a whole folder full of them, right? And when I first started, I was just kind of doing that and then starting painting. But organizing the information really is the biggest thing that you will ever do in concept art. Like, it doesn't matter what program you learn, doesn't matter how good you get. Learning how to organize your reference board is the most important aspect that you will ever have to do when it comes to actually getting good at design, right? And it sounds funny, it has nothing to do with drawing, it has everything to do with thinking, you know? It's a weird concept, right? Because I know, like, because I do mentorships and I do classes and various things like that. And whenever I give an assignment to one of my students, or my students as a whole, they'll do a reference board, they'll kind of like slap some things together and like, oh, this is kind of what I was thinking. And then like there's no cohesive thought that's happening in the reference board themselves. And then when you actually look at the sketches, generally speaking, there's not a cohesive thought, right? Just because not a lot of time is going into why and what aspects you're pulling from the reference board, right? So this is a visual way I kind of like doing this. I've talked about at length before, very, very much ranting about like, not using pure ref, especially in the beginning. Like when you're a student, pure ref is not your friend. I don't say it like that. Pure ref's great. People use it all the time. A lot of people use it. If you're somebody that uses pure ref a lot and you're just kind of putting stuff on a board, I would highly advise against it. If you're a professional, you do whatever you want to do, right? If you're somebody that's already working and you've been doing it for a little while, pure ref's great, right? But if you're a student, I would say about 95% of students that I've seen using pure ref are not using it wrong, right? But using it in a very not great way, right? Just because like I think the cool thing about pure ref, right, is that you can put images down, you can organize things quickly, and it like, it makes the presentation look good, right? And the act of like putting things in categories is like organized, right? But in reality, that's not really what I mean when I say organized, right? When I say organized, I don't mean just a good presentation in a good format in which it's laid out. When I say organized, I mean having certain categories and understanding what goes in each category, right? So for example, when you see my reference board, I kind of distilled down each one of my main references, looking at the three on the left first. Don't worry about the pen for now, I'll get to that. But looking at the three on the left, I have the BMS, right? Big, medium, small. I'm using this reference board to kind of help, where's my pen at? To kind of help me understand what I'm thinking about, right? So let me grab my brush here. Boom. So the reason I'm doing this is because I understand what I'm doing with each reference. Right now, the reference isn't set up the way I kind of want in terms of like the organization, but there are categories in which I have them, and then they're assigned to each one. We can change these around, we can reorganize them, but we understand that there are categories and that there's a certain delineation when it comes to what that means, like what that reference is used for, right? So whenever talking about this idea really quickly, if you haven't seen before, I've talked about it a couple times on in my classes, on other streams. I think I did it for the camera one too, the the Pokemon Snap redesign, the Dune Buggy and all that stuff. And so pulling together this reference board, right? The reason we have big, medium, small, right? And really quickly, I'll just kind of show what I'm talking about when I do that, right? So I'm going to draw this kind of like, amazingly beautifully rendered house, right? The coolest house you guys have ever seen. All right. Sorry. So that's big. Color code this medium, right? Boom. Medium, boom, boom, boom. There you go. And then small, right? So what this means is, what I'm doing is I'm trying to set up a way that these references interact with my objects, with my world, right? So this house, right, represents the things that need to be designed in this world. So in this case, architecture, prop, a vehicle, whatever, doesn't matter. But the whole point is there's an organization method to it, right? So with the big, in this case, a lever espresso machine, right, the big shape is the silhouettes or the big reads of these designs, right? It's not like any particular piece, it's the whole thing. When you look at the whole image, it should kind of feel like this, right? Or, you know, it should relate to that in some sort of way. So in this case, right, it's the kind of like the envelope shape of the house. It's the walls and the roof, right? It's that triangle shape plus the walls on the side. That's a house, right? It's the major shapes that we're seeing. And then for medium, right, we have the pieces that make up those major shapes. So in this case, like the roof shape and then the walls, right? The roof and the walls by themselves are not the house. It's together that makes the big shape. So the big shape is comprised of medium shapes, right? Makes sense. And so that's how I'm organizing my medium shapes, and my small shapes are the details, meaning like the doors, the windows, the roof, the shingles, you know what I mean? It's not the roof itself and it's not the wall itself, but it kind of comprises and it makes the whole thing actually a house, right? And so when I organize my reference board, this is actually what I'm doing in my head, not in such a simplistic way, but I'm setting up destinations for these designs. I'm going to be mixing things for sure, and there's a bit of like play that's going to happen where it's not so rigid, but when I'm organizing my reference boards, I know where they go, right? And if I ever don't like the combination that I'm making, I'm going to take one of these references, I'm going to move them to the left, right? I'm going to move them to wherever they need to go. I'm like, oh, I was feeling Stonehenge a little bit more. Cool. Or I was, this espresso machine isn't really quite what I want it to be. I like the medium shapes of the crow. Whatever it is. I can organize it. I can change it. It can adapt. But at the very least, there's an organization method to it, right? Just because things are on a page and they're, organized, very nice and neat, and you can click a button and it rearranges some things, does not mean it's organized, right? Just because you shove all the shit in the closet doesn't mean that you have, an organized, clean house. It just means you kind of shoved everything into all the storage spaces. You know what I'm saying? Because when you actually look at it, can you find what you're looking for? And do you understand, what all the pieces that you need to, build your thing, right? Because the important part about this that a lot of students don't understand is this is useful not just for you, but for people that are not you as well, right? Weird way to say your coworkers, your juniors, the artists under you, artists working with you, doesn't matter, right? Because in the entertainment sphere, right, whether you're working in games, theme park, movies, animation, whatever, you can't just design for yourself, right? You have to design with the team in mind. Whether that means you receive a reference board, right, from your leads that kind of organize out the thoughts and they kind of spell it out for you, or you're creating a boards for your juniors, right, for your teammates, because you're the one that's like the art director or the lead or something that's making this board, and you need to make something that's cohesive and understandable to another person. If you hand people people just like random images in a folder, generally speaking, it's gonna go badly every single time, right? As a freelancer and someone that's worked in like a lot of contracting jobs, and for those that have worked in contracting jobs, you know what I'm talking about. You're gonna get a client, right? And a lot of times they're not artists. They're just people, producers or whoever, right? Like there's a good amount of times where it's not an artist handing you reference, right? And if you're very new to, I guess, the freelancing world, they're going to hand you folders of stuff. It's literally just like a Google Drive or just a flash drive full of images or a packet, right? And it's just like, oh, it's kind of like all these things, and it's just listed on a thing. And then what happened a lot when I first started was I'd be looking at my folder that I was given of like images. And then I would like pull from, like this one, like, let's say like I would kind of really heavily dominate it on like, let's say the crow reference, right? Because I saw a crow in the folder, so I kind of leaned heavily towards it. And like, no, we just like the kind of oily kind of black color, right? We don't really want a bird in there. You know, they're like, why didn't you fucking tell me that? You know what I mean? Like, it's always like there's these images in folders that really don't, I guess, they're not really intending it to be something that's like super like dominant as a form of reference inside of the image, right? They saw something in it and they're like, oh, that's kind of cool, and they kind of went with it, right? And so when you're designing, you need to understand what references they're leaning more towards, and then what references, you know, they're just kind of like, oh, you know, it'd be cool if. And sometimes they're like, oh, they sent me a picture of this, but they're like, oh, we like the moss on that stick, you know. It's like, and they won't even tell you half the time. And it's like, what the hell, man? Like, you know, we went through this whole thing, and then, you know, why did you just cut that out? You know, but they don't know that, you know, they don't understand that there's other things you can derive from photos, right? So this is why I organize my references so much, and I put so much emphasis on it, because this is the difference between being a junior artist and a senior level artist, right? You understand what makes up your world and how you can design in a cohesive and repeatable way, right? How many of you ever designed something where you you made like a vehicle, or you made like something, right? Like just anything, and then like you made the next design, you made the next thing in there, right? Like maybe there's another vehicle or another building, and then it just doesn't look the same. You use the same references, but it doesn't look like it's part of the same world, right? Like that happens a lot, like, you know, because more often than not, we don't know the formula that went into actually making that thing, right? It's just like baking a cake. You got flour, eggs, sugar, you know, various other things. And if you change the proportions of those ingredients, right, it's going to be a different recipe, right? It's only certain proportions that actually make a cake, because otherwise you could make something completely different, right? And it just is not what they asked for, you know, it's not what they wanted, right? So, rant over, but the whole idea is organize your reference boards and understand what they mean, right? So in this case, I have a lever special machine, I have Stonehenge, I have a crow, and then I have this Irushi fountain pen. So, what does all this mean, right? What is this, right? So, what I want to do is I want to build a world, right? In this case, this is, you know, form language for world building, right? So I'm going to apply a form language to a world, right? So the biggest thing that I kind of want to convey here, right, is that whenever I'm designing, especially creating a reference board like this is not a reference board for anything in particular, right? This is a reference board or a rule set for the entire world, right? Everything is going to get its own reference board, where it's like, if there's a vehicle, I can make a vehicle. If there's a house, I can make a house, whatever. That's all separate, right? And I try not to combine anything on this one, because this is the rule set where it's like, you know, I have a world and this is what it should look and feel like. There's keywords associated with this that I'm going to pull and put onto my my image, right? But this is not defined by anything in particular, right? This is not a specific object. This is the entire world. Hopefully that makes sense. With that in mind, right? What location am I doing? So I actually recently moved to Japan, in case if you guys didn't know that. But the location I'm actually in is called Gifu, Japan, and it's a cool, nice, like, historical area, right? I mean, the area that I'm at, it's, you know, pretty. It's not like it's like the most modern place in the world, but it's a pretty modern place. But there's some cool traditional sides of this place, right? Where there's this cool, like, tradition that they have here where it's called cormorant fishing, or ukai fishing, right? And basically what they do is they're on this boat. Oops. Let me move that up. There you go. All right. So they're on this boat, right? And then they have these birds kind of fishing for them, right? So they tie this rope around the bird's neck, and then the bird dives down, grabs the fish, comes back up. Because the rope's there, the fish actually can't go all the way down. And then so what happens is they reel the bird comes back up, and then they the bird spits it out, and that's how they fish, right? It's a very like traditional, like this area is like known for that, right? And then the fire itself is like it's how they attract fish to the area. So it's like a nighttime thing. It looks really cool. So, and it's a actual like it's a protected like traditional thing here in Japan. Like I think is the Imperial Palace will like pay you to like do this to kind of keep the tradition alive, which is pretty cool. But this area is kind of known for that, right? Also, this area is known for making these really cool paper lanterns, and these are actually particular because the washi paper, the paper that's on these lanterns, is actually made here. A lot of it, they're kind of known for it. I don't know if it's like the best ever, but they are known for it here. And there's a particular designer that came in like I think it was like the 50s or 60s, but he kind of combined the lantern with this kind of like this I don't know these legs ideas, right? He got it off of like the idea of a watchtower that he was seeing in the area, and he combined it and he made this really cool lamp. And this area is like is known to like sell these things, and just some photos of the area as well. These aren't my photos, by the way. These are just random photos, but the reason why I want to kind of show you this is because what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to take this form language and apply it to this world. And hopefully this comes to be a cohesive, interesting world that, at least kind of makes sense, right? So the reason why I'm using an actual location that I'm learning about, I don't want to say I'm familiar with, but I'm actually understanding it, is because oftentimes when we create worlds, we just kind of make up a space where it's like, oh, there's a building and then there's ground and there's a sky. It's like, and it's like the most generic thing that you'll ever see. And the issue with that is oftentimes we as people, right, because we're in a world and we walk around and we live in these cultures, right? Whatever culture you're in, whatever location you're in, you understand what it means to be in a place that has life, right? And so as an artist, it's really hard to know it, right? We feel it like when we see it, like just kind of like when you first start figure drawing, you know what I mean? Like, you're not good at figure drawing, but you can tell that whatever the hell you just drew is not good. You know what I mean? Like it's like the proportions are kind of off, and you always get that comment of like something's off. I don't know why. It's because you're used to seeing people so much, right? It's because we see people every day, or hopefully you see people every day, and you just know what it's supposed to look like, but you don't actively know, you don't consciously know, you subconsciously know because you're just used to seeing it. But now something's off, but you don't, and that's what we kind of learn, right? We're trying to download all the information we need to know that, oh, okay, that's off because of this proportion or whatever, right? It's the same thing with environments. We live in an environment, right? We're used to seeing little nuances, right? Little papers turned, like 20 degrees, little like debris, crumbs, like different textures on the sidewalk, various things like that. And so when I reference something for a world, I try to find an actual location. It doesn't have to actually look like that by the end of it, but it should feel similar, right? Because if you try to create something from scratch, more often than not, you're going to get something very generic, right? Because it just doesn't exist, right? So if you're trying to build a forest, like you're designing something, right? Even though it's not going to look exactly like that forest. Maybe it's an alien forest, but you based it off of the redwoods because the redwoods have a particular feeling to it. Or you based like a city off of New York, right? Because New York has a very particular feel to it. Even though it could be a city in space, it's the vibe that you're looking for. And you want these little nuanced things because the more specific you are with your reference, the more you're going to pull from it. If you just say, Japan as a whole, there's so many different areas, right? There's so many different things that you're only going to get the very generic ideas, right? So that's why I kind of have like the very specific location, and some of the things they're kind of known for, because when I build this world, I want them to be known for something. It doesn't have to actually be, they don't have to actually be known for these two specific things, but there's an idea that this place has a craft or has a tradition that they do that I'm going to probably capitalize on, right? Using some of the information that I have here. Cool. Is there any questions on that? Let's see. All right. So, with that in mind, let's talk about this. Let's kind of get into some of the stuff that I'm thinking about. So, I have 3 references here, right? Lever, special machine, Stonehenge, a crow, and then a Rushi fountain pen, right? The 3 on the left here, they're not organized quite yet. Oopsies. Nope, not that one. There you go. They're not organized quite yet the way I want them, because that's actually what the exploration phase is. And for everybody, right, what we're going to do is we're going to start with a formula, right? We have these in a certain order where they're like, you know, they're very particular to whatever category they're in, and we're kind of starting there, right? But as you kind of go, take these and move them around, right? What does this look like? You know, this formula is very different than this formula here, right? It's, even though it's the same references, everything else is basically the same. It's gonna be different. It has to be, because the way you organized it is different, right? You're pulling different words, you're understanding different things about it, and you're using it in different parts, right? So move these around, see what you come up with. And it's gonna help you kind of generate ideas a little bit better within the parameters that you've already set, right? And this is actually closer to what we actually do in a professional field, right? So a little bit about me, I specialize in like kind of blue sky development. So a lot of times whenever I hop onto a project, all they have is actually reference boards, right? They just have references. They might have, you know, like a couple images here and there from the director or whoever, or maybe, you know, but very, very often I will not come into a handful of images. I'm the one that's making the handful of images for that first pass, you know? So when they give me references, this is kind of what I do. And something that I really want to point out, because this happens a lot in a student setting, right? In classes, in, you know, wherever, more often than not, if a student runs into problems where it's like, you know, oh, I couldn't make this work, right? What they'll do is they'll change the reference. And what I would highly recommend everybody that's participating, or just everybody in general, try to break that habit, right? Because, you know, I taught the World Building 2 class, you know, I've done mentorships as well. And then like anytime there's a roadblock where there's like, oh, I couldn't figure out how to get this reference to work, so I just switched it with something else, right? In a student setting, that's fine, because you're the only one that's actually going to be, you know, approving this project, right? But in a work setting, you cannot do that. That is the easiest way to get let go, to be, you know, not called back, to be fired, whatever, right? Because they wanted this reference. They asked you, they said, hey, I have these references. This is kind of what I was thinking. Can you make it? And you're supposed to be able to design from that, right? It's a bad habit to get used to doing, especially for like more advanced students, right? Because in a work setting, you can't bail yourself out like that, because it doesn't work that way, right? Whatever references they give you is what they give you. You can add a couple, and this is actually where, sorry, bumped the mic. This is kind of where the extra comes in. I'll talk about that in a second. But what I want you to know is when you put your references together, the best thing that you can do is reorganize the category, right? But I want you to stick to it. Try not to change the reference board, because if you change your reference board, you're creating a scenario where you're creating an unrealistic scenario, and it's going to it's gonna hurt when you start working. I'll say it like that, but like it's not a good time, because you're so used to like just changing things if you don't like it, you know. All right, cool. So enough of that. The next thing I want to talk about, right? I keep talking about this extra category, right? And it's not categorized in the big, medium, and small. So in a normal setting, right? In you know, just as artists, or you know, as designers, right? We usually are given like references, and what we're really doing, right? Like let's focus on these two for a second. Oops, let's not draw on that layer. Let's draw on this layer. There you go. Let's just focus on these two for now. This is what I call like level 1, where you're like, the easiest thing to do is do 1 plus 1, right? A plus B. right? Because it's pretty easy. You can maybe see how that might turn out, right? We can also like, move that to like this side or whatever, right? But the whole point is the easiest way to go about things is 1 plus 1, because that's the first step. It's car plus broccoli, right? Or whatever it is. The next thing that you want to understand is 1 plus 1 plus 1, right? Now things get a little bit different, because if you do 1 plus 1, if you do just two things, you can probably come up with an IP that's actually very similar, right? You name any two things together, we probably have an IP that covers that, right? Like a game or a movie, something that already exists, right? It's it's pretty standard. 1 plus 1 plus 1, that's when things get different, because the chances of a project being all three references at the same time and in the same proportion that you did it, pretty slim, right? Just the amount of variation you can do with three different references, right? And if you're a beginner level student, just focus on here, just 1 plus 1, right? Super easy, just kind of go for that, right? If you're a more advanced student, right, or maybe intermediate level student to advanced, start focusing on how you can do all three references, right? But to be able to kind of function at a professional level, to be really somebody that creates something interesting and unique, this is where that extra thing comes in, right? This is a reference that I let influence my world, but I don't assign a value to it, right? Because this is kind of where things can go awry. This is kind of where you're just kind of throwing a wrench into the system, because if you're very predictable, right? And this is a very predictable kind of path, right? It's very formulaic, where it's like, if you keep doing things that way, generally speaking, you'll probably come up with something okay. But what I need is great ideas. I can't just have good ideas. Good ideas is very standard, but you need something that's really going to blow people away, something that's going to be truly unique. And if you throw in one more reference, it's like, and then if you can let this influence 1% of your project, or you can let it influence 99% of your project. It can be all based around that, or it can be like barely anything. I could just like how the details are, or the whole function of the pen influences everything I do in this reference, right? But this is kind of where, if you really want to create something interesting, that's the last thing that I would highly recommend doing, right? It's finding that extra reference that really kicks this into overdrive. And the important part about this reference in particular, that it has to be you, right? This is a reference that is something that you're interested in, something that you like, something that you do, something that makes you, right? If you're somebody that doesn't really have any hobbies, right? Because art becomes the job, and then now you're hobbyless, right? Because art was the hobby, right? Start kind of figuring out like what makes you a person, right? What makes you interesting, because that's what's going to make your projects interesting, right? How many artists, like, when you see their work and you're like, wow, they're super cool, they're like my favorite artist or whatever, right? More often than not, they have something that they're actually very interested in, and you see it quite often, right? Like, you just kind of know, like with some of the better artists, when you see them design, like some of the people with the more unique designs or the more interesting takes on images, right? More often than not, they have work, or they have images that they just have something to it, and it's like very them. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's a very unique thing to this person, and it could be a reference, it could be just a random inspiration or whatever. But the whole point is, right, they're influencing their designs with something unique to them as a person, right? And this is kind of where we want the reference board to be, right? This is a very I don't know. Like, I don't want to say like, it's a very spelled out way to see it. Like, because when we design, we're kind of just free flowing, right? But this is like how I like to try to explain it, right? Because, I can just say, oh, just feel it out, man. You know what I mean? Just comes to you, bro. You could do that, or we can actually like, come up with ways to actually make that juice kind of flow, right? So in this case, this is kind of what I like to think about. I don't always like have the reference pulled up next to me, like, because sometimes it'll just come to me as I'm designing. But just know that that extra thing is something that belongs to me as a designer, because this is actually what makes you different. Because if we gave everybody, or like most like standard concept artists, the standard kind of 3 references, right? Generally speaking, if they're good designers, they'll be able to mix it up, in a really cool way, and more often than not, it's probably gonna look okay, right? Just because, like, I can draw a castle, you can draw a castle, so cool. But what makes your castle better than my castle? Or what makes my designs better than your designs, right? It's that little bit extra that makes us unique, right? My lived experience versus your lived experience, right? And my voice versus your voice. And it's not saying that one's better than the other. It just means that that's why artists are so unique, right? Another reason why, AI is probably not going to replace us, but that's a whole other conversation. We'll talk about that later if you guys want. But, it's the same idea. This extra thing is what makes you unique, right? So try to find something that is actually useful. Something that makes you whole, right? Something that, when you're not getting paid, what are you doing, right? This is kind of what I like to think about as I'm designing, right? So hopefully that all makes sense. We have our location and then we have our reference board, right? And basically what we're going to be doing, right, for the next 4 weeks, right, is taking these references, right, and applying it to that world, right? Pretty easy. It's going to be kind of like a slice of life, just kind of like a standard, like, just kind of exploring a location. We'll have like a character and something in there doing a thing, doing whatever. As I kind of design, I'll start figuring that out. But just kind of understand, like, we have a location that I'm intending to design, and then I have my references that are supposed to be applied to that. Right? Any questions at all?
I was just wondering, how much of the shape and design of the location are you referencing, or is it more of just a reference for like the story and like the vibe?
It's mostly story and vibe, right? But again, right, that's where the line kind of gets fuzzy, right? Where, because like this area of Japan, or just this type of architecture as a whole, is very particular, right? It's not that everything's going to look Japanese. That's not the intention. But there are some layout things that you might want to consider. There's some like functional things that the city kind of does that you might want to consider. It's up to you really on like how much of that influence do you want. Do you want something that's mostly Japan with a little bit of influence, or do you want something that is mostly the influence that kind of has a vibe of Japan, right? That's the kind of like the tug of war that you have to play as a designer, and part of that variation process. Because if you're trying to send this to a client, you're gonna want to do both. Right? Like if I was paying you and I was like, hey, here's my references, here's the location, here's what it kind of supposed to feel like, but like in space, I don't know, like you pull all these together, and then you kind of do some that's like a little more Japan, and then you do some that's a little more like, Mars or whatever, and then you're kind of like trying to balance that, and then that's when the client like picks some of the images and like, oh, okay, we're going that direction instead, and then you kind of know it's like, cool. A lot less Japan, a lot more space, right? Or whatever it is, right? Makes sense?
Yeah, cool. Thank you.
Yeah, for sure.
I'd like to ask what motivates your reference photo choices, even in the main 3? Like,
oh yeah.
What made you come up with Crow or Presso Machine? If I'm struggling to come up with something, are you looking for a wild card? I mean, are they all kind of trying to be on field, or did you go into it thinking, I wanted to mix the idea of Stonehenge and espresso? Because you answered my question earlier. I'm sorry I didn't respond yet, but I appreciate it. But now I'm left with a couple gaps and reference ideas, and I'm not really sure where to begin looking at.
Yeah. So a great question. So really the main thing that I'm like doing whenever I'm I guess for myself, right? Because if we're talking about a client, it's whatever they gave you, right? Except for the extra, right? Except for that one thing, which is usually mine or whatever. These three, that's given to you by the client. But when I'm doing it for myself, for my own projects, for live streams, it's usually kind of whatever I'm interested in, right? Because so for me, I'm kind of into coffee, right? I don't know if you guys can see that in the back in the camera, but there's a whole like coffee. My espresso machine is like literally coming overseas right now. But I'm kind of into it, right? So I like it, and I know about it. I understand how to use this machine. I don't have this exact one, but it's like I understand the system. I understand what it's all about. I understand the culture behind it, right? Stonehenge, I just thought it was cool, to be completely honest. A lot of it, like a lot of times where it's like some of your references, I want them to be, things that kind of are personal to you, especially, because when they say, like, oh, design something that's unique to you, right? This is what they mean, right? Or this is how I start at the very least, right? It's like use references that are particular to you, because when I say lever especially, I don't mean just the machine. I mean the whole thing around it, right? It's the culture, it's the ideas, it's the feeling, it's the thousands of extra dollars for a 1% difference, in quality. Is a mentality behind it, right? And there's a whole thing behind that. As well as Stonehenge, right? It's not just the organization of rocks that I want, it's the wonder behind it. It's the mythology, it's the I guess the mystery behind these things that actually for me is interesting, right? And then crow, I actually like crows a lot, and it's one of my more favorite birds. It's weird. I don't know. Maybe he's wearing all black. So, but I do particularly like crows, and it's just something that I'm kind of interested in, right? And then Urushi fountain pens. I do have I don't want to say I have a fountain pen collection. I have a couple fountain pens, but I do write with my fountain pen pretty often. And I was literally writing with it yesterday. I was like, yeah, we'll just throw that other thing. You know what I mean? Because I did use this before in. I think it was the windmill. No, what's it? Yeah. Oh wait. I think it was the windmill city that I did for like 2 years ago live stream. But I like kind of used it. It was like and it was extra there too, where it was like I just kind of put it in. I was planning to kind of include that a little bit more, but we'll see. But yeah. So really just pull from things for one that you think is interesting, and that's the key part. I don't want to see shit where it's like, oh, hey, here's like, military stuff. Like, I'm not saying military isn't cool. Some people are into that, but a lot of times we come up with like the same things. Like if you ever go to like a class, right? It's Viking, it's Egyptian, it's coral reefs, it's blowfish, a couple other things. But it's like it's always the same damn references, right? Because everyone's doing it and it looks kind of cool. But there's really nothing to do with you as a person, right? And so when you're pulling references, find stuff that you think is cool. Don't do things that everyone else thinks is cool, right? Things that you're actually interested in, things that you Google up, things that you deep dived in for no reason, right? And it could be kind of nerdy, it could be whatever, right? But at the end of the day, it's things that are particular to you. There can be some things, like especially on the big, medium, and small section, where it's like Stonehenge is cool. I'm not like into it, I'm not like building rocks around my apartment just because I'm like, dude, I want to be in the area, But there is a bit of like, oh, that's kind of cool, and I like this. I like the for me, I love these kinds of things where it's like, how the hell did that get there? And it kind of like sparks the imagination. Like for me, that's really cool. That's what I was actually pulling from this reference. The reason as to why I picked it, it's not like because I like rocks, big rocks for that matter. It's just like the wonder behind it. Like, how the hell did that get there? Like, what did they use that for? Why is it even there? How long has that been there? You know what I mean? And that's kind of what I was trying to tap into. So, does it help?
Yes, thank you.
Cool. Anybody else?
Hi, Kenny. Yes, I have one question.
Yeah, what's up?
Do you add like a triangle, square, and other shapes like that in your design, or you limit yourself just to those images out there?
Yeah, I know what you're saying. I would say like, okay, so when we talk about like the form language of like a triangle, right? Circles and squares, right? This is like form language that you can apply to the shapes. This isn't something that I start off thinking about. For one, the references here actually have those references, right? You can actually see a lot of circle here. Like there's a lot of like, cylinders and round shapes. A lot of squares, actually a lot of circles here too, right? It's the organization of circles, but they're all actually kind of squares. And then here you can see a lot of triangles, right? So it's pretty easy to kind of see how that you can like pull shapes from that. But what this does, right, is that when we pull from this, these are keywords that we're going to be, and I'll explain this more in a second. These are keywords that we're using to influence our designs. So the shapes are one thing, right? Shapes are part of it, which is absolutely true. But that's already, you can already have that in the reference itself, right? If I want something more round, I'll just use more of the espresso machine. Oopsies, what the? I'll just use more of the espresso machine. If I want more triangles, I'll probably use more of the bird, right? So the form language, like the shape language itself, is something where it's already built in, and it's not deep enough for me to where I want to, I guess, focus too much on it, because there's not enough keywords that come out of triangle, right? But Stonehenge has a bunch of keywords that can come out of that that make it particular. You know what I'm saying?
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Sorry, my cat's like, I don't know if you can see that. You probably can't. He's like, there's a ledge right here. You can actually see it on camera. And he's like right there. And he's just like rolling around, knocking stuff over. Anyway, cool. So let's talk about this. So whenever I'm looking at my reference, right, I'm gonna turn off my location real quick. There's a couple of things that we want to do, right? Looking at this, I'm gonna start typing because that's what I do. Let's talk about shape language, right? So form language and what we can pull from it, right? So there's keywords, there's ideas that we want to associate with each thing, right? Because when we have references, we don't want to just pull the shapes, right? A big thing that I find a lot that happens with especially student work is that whenever we're designing and you have a form language, we only pull the physical shapes, right? So there's the form language, or let's put shape language, it's not so confusing. Shape language. There it goes. So the shape language is the physical shapes that you see, right? So just like what I was talking about a second ago, right? We have, for the espresso machine, we have a lot of like cylinders, a lot of curved shapes, a lot of tubes, right? You can kind of see that there's a square or a circle, right? Kind of mix of both. And then Stonehenge, right? We have a lot of squares, a lot of cube shapes, but they're all arranged in a circle shape, right? And then, Crow, we have a bunch of triangle shapes, right? Those are the physical shapes that we're seeing. And that's part of it, right? That's something where I want you to understand that is part of the things that I want you to pull from the images. But I want you to go deeper, right? Because the next thing that you can pull from this is function, right? What does it do? What is it meant to, what is it supposed to be? How does it work, right? These are things that, you can't see without like an animation, or there's an idea behind it. Like especially in particular, the lever espresso machine versus like an automatic espresso machine, right? Because the lever is more of a direct kind of thing. It's a direct input. It's a mechanical aspect. You pull down the lever, it pulls up a plunger or pushes down a column of water, whatever it is. But the whole point is it's a direct thing that actually incorporates, or that kind of makes the machine work, right? It's kind of like a manual car versus an automatic. It's a very particular feeling. And so when I'm pulling the function from this, I should understand that my world needs to be a little bit more mechanical, right? There needs to be a direct input action. There needs to be things that kind of make it more direct, more of a mechanical thing, because it's part of the form language, right? Because otherwise I could have picked a more automatic espresso machine, something that's a little more like just one button touch and then it just kind of does its thing, right? Which is a whole other thing. It's a function of the reference that makes it, makes it particular, right? And the last thing, right, is abstract. Abstract ideas. So this is kind of where I want most people to focus, because shape language is easy. You're going to do that without even thinking about it, right? Because you're going to look at it and be like, cool, tubes, great. But the abstract ideas is actually where things become very interesting, right? So with a crow, right, they are omnivorous, right? They're kind of like dumpster divers of the sky, right? So with crows, there's a particular like idea behind them, right? There's this I don't know, this scavenger-ness. Sorry, hold on, give me a sec. There's like planes. There's like I think there's like a military base or something nearby. Anyway, so with crows, they kind of dive into the trash and they kind of eat, and they're kind of scavengers, right? They're not really like, when you think, I mean, I'm sure they do it, I don't know, but when you think about crows, you don't really think about like the early bird meets or gets the worm type of bird. You know what I'm saying? Like they're not like, diving down and getting a bug kind of thing. Like I'm sure they do, but a lot of it's like associated with trash, right? So they're kind of scavenging from things. They kind of eat anything, right? Or even like when you see death, for example, right? Like there's always like crows and things nearby. You know what I'm saying? Sorry, a lot of planes. And so with the abstract idea of a crow, you could think death, right? It's not really on the reference board, but the idea of death can be associated with a crow. And then if you associate death with your location, what happens, right? Because let's say you had a castle, and then one of your form languages is like a sword, right? A sword is very aggressive, right? It's an attacking weapon. So maybe the culture behind that castle, or behind that place, is more aggressive, a more conquering type of world. And so you're using this abstract idea to inform some of your decisions of like what's happening in this place, versus like a shield, right? A shield is very defensive. They kind of like hole up. There's a more peaceful aspect to it, right? And so maybe the people of that castle are a lot more peaceful, a lot nicer, whatever it is. But these abstract ideas can radically transform the way your project's going. And this is what I want you to think about. It's not just about the form languages or the shape languages, because the triangles, the tubes, the circles, even like the chrome body, that's pretty cool. But that's not the only thing I want you to think about. Focus here, because a lot of the times people don't, right? This stuff always happens. This is easy, right? How it works, this is a little harder to understand, but it's something that is easier understood. It's this one that really trips people up. So try to think about, how does abstract ideas from each one of my references influence my world as a whole? You know what I mean? Kind of like Stonehenge, right? The abstract idea about it is the wonder about it, right? Like the mystery. Because mystery doesn't have a shape, right? Mystery doesn't have a visual to it that you can like draw, right? Because you have to it could be anything. And that's where we want to kind of design. That's the kind of headspace we want to be in. How do you create a world with mystery, right? Of especially the kind of mystery we're talking about here, like not like a murder mystery, but like these huge things that no one has any idea how it got there, that's the kind of mystery that you want to build into your world, right? So hopefully that makes sense. Whew, a lot of talking. Like I was saying, a lot of this is going to be breaking down this reference board, really, because this is the most important part about design. If you don't understand how to organize your reference board and what you're pulling from it, it almost doesn't matter what you draw, right? Because if you can draw well, great. But if you can't design well, if you can't organize your reference board, you won't be able to design well. Or at the very least, not consistently, right? So just try to keep this in mind. I know I'm spending a lot of time on it, but it is something where it is highly important. So, but yeah, let's get into this. I was talking a lot, so let's kind of start deep diving. All right. So just like last week, I'm gonna do the same technique. I'm gonna kind of show you so last week I was just kind of doing some ships, right? Because that was like a reference board that I had for one of my mentorships, and I was just kind of like continuing that thought process. But here, this is gonna be a whole new reference board for a whole new project. So I'm gonna create some stuff that hopefully is in the same vein of like the same thought process and the same technique, but with my new references, right? So it's gonna be a little more architecture based. I am planning to do a more fantasy based world, right? It's not like like medieval like sticks and stone people, but a more fantasy based idea. And I'm gonna kind of design with these references based off of those ideas. So go, let's do it. All right. And if you didn't see it last week's episode, really what I'm doing here, I'm just getting a hard round transfer brush, right? One that has opacity on it, basically. And then I'm going to turn the opacity down to like 40%. This way, whenever I push down 100%, it's not like fully opaque, essentially. And I can like kind of get more accidents out of this, right? That's kind of what I'm looking for. So just as a heads up, if you don't know kind of what I'm doing. So, but let's go. All right. Any questions? Any maybe not pertaining to this. This is kind of like we're in that free zone mode where like we're just kind of like talking. I do have some stuff I'd love to talk about, but just curious if you guys have any conversation points that you're dying to talk about.
Are you like working in Japan, or are you just out there doing freelance work like remotely?
No, I'm just doing freelance. So
Cool.
yeah.
Because it was your partner that is teaching, right?
Yeah. So she's teaching, she's working,
Cool.
but I am I'm stay-at-home provider.
Nice.
I get to take care of the cats. You know how it is.
Cool. Yeah. I was just curious, would there be any studios in Japan? I mean, I'm sure there's plenty that you would like, I don't know, try to shoot for, you personally, or?
I mean, there's some definitely some studios that I'd be interested in working in. Like Square would be pretty cool. Because I grew up on those games, so that would be pretty dope.
Of course. Of course.
I mean, most studios I think I'd be pretty interested in working just for the experience, mostly, right? I mean, I've heard stories, where like the work conditions I've heard are the way they are, but I mean, we'll figure that out. I'm more interested in just learning and like seeing. I think for me, just because like I want to experience the other side, right? Where it's like, and I'm not really trying to, I don't know, like stay somewhere long term, right? But I do want to kind of learn more about like other industries, right? Because I mean, Japan's industry is very different than America's, and it's just I don't know, it's very interesting to me. So I'd love to know more about it, but yeah, for now, I'm just hanging out. So if anybody's looking,
yeah, I mean, being in a new place, new visual library experiences and culture.
Yeah,
I'm sure it's super inspiring being out there.
It's funny because I've made a move once already, right? It's because I moved from Texas, the Dallas area, to LA when I first I guess started, right? And it was something where making that move was for me like life changing, just because I mean other than like changing your life and going, but like just the mindset behind it, right? And I think for me, I really enjoy the act of, I don't know, like figuring things out and learning something new and seeing how other people do things, especially because like it's just me as a person. I'm not somebody that like likes, I guess, repetition. You know what I mean? Like there's things where
Stability almost.
Yeah, it's not like not stability. Like I like
not the right word.
Yeah, I like having a stable life, right? But it's more of the it's more of like I like changing things up a lot, right? Because it makes you grow, right? I find that
Yeah.
people that move, people that change their living scenarios, it doesn't have to be often, but at the very least do it. They're they're a different kind of person, and it sounds weird, but it's like you're a different. Oops, sorry. You're a different person when it comes to like that. You know what I'm saying? I don't know. It's really hard to explain, but it's a
No,
certain.
I totally get it. I mean, yeah, because it's like, I don't know. It's a confidence booster too, for sure. Like personally. But,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's 2024, man. It's like worst case scenario, you just move back home. It's like what's the worst that could happen, you know? As long as you're not breaking laws, as long as you're not, like actively destroying things, it's like you'll be fine, you know? It's like I'm just making shapes, and it's cool because like I think for me, we have about an hour left, and I'm just like making something up. I don't know how this is gonna go. I don't know what the hell this thing even is. I have like a faint idea of like maybe what it could be, but that's changing like every stroke that I make. But I'm just like, oh, that's kind of fun, and just play around, right? For those that are like gonna be following along and doing stuff, there's ideas that you've kind of developed as you're making that reference board. Like pursue those, absolutely, but be open to change. Be open to being like, oh, that's different. Okay, cool. I kind of like where that's going, and just see what happens. It's weird at first. It's awkward, right? Where it's like, it's hard if you don't know where you're going. It can feel very, I don't know, very like you just kind of meandering, right? Especially because a lot of students, their whole career up to this point, or I guess their whole learning journey, has been like being very deliberate about things, right? Because you're just kind of like, oh, I got to do this, got to do that, got to do this, right? But like, have fun, just explore, just make some brushstrokes and be like, you know what, that looks like trash, and I'm okay with that, because we can make anything look good, right? Most of the time, generally speaking, if you're good at drawing, if you're good at your foundations or whatever, you can probably make it work, right? Generally speaking. But making a good idea, that's hard. That's difficult, And that's what I want everyone here to kind of like really, I guess, try to figure out. It's like, how do I just kind of mush some pixels around, and eventually you kind of find some cool shapes that you're kind of seeing, but just try, just see what happens.
So right now, these are not based off of your references. You would interject that later.
No, these are based off my references. I mean, I'm like thinking about it, like it might not be super relevant, super prominent right now, but it's like it's coming. It's supposed to be right now. So in my mind, I'm kind of thinking about some of the here. Let me turn these off. So in the Gifu area, I guess in most of Japan, to be completely honest, but it's particularly in the Gifu area, there's like a lot of these like random small shrines as you're kind of walking around, like just like in a neighborhood. Like literally, there's one like freaking like a block away from me, a small shrine, and it's just kind of there. And I was like, oh, what if I just made something like that? And I started taking like some of these cylindrical shapes, and I'm trying to incorporate some of that as I'm working. As I'm starting with my big shape, and then I start incorporating small bits of my medium shape, and then small bits of my small shapes. And like this shape looks pretty stupid right now. It's not the coolest thing I've ever seen, but hopefully it's something that it can turn into something, right? But I'm just slowly, I have something in my mind, and I'm hoping that something cool kind of comes out of it. You know what I'm saying? What the hell is this? Gross. There you go. Let's put that on repeat. All right. Anything you guys want to talk about? I have some. I do have a topic. I'm kind of like. There's some. I had a conversation with a friend this week, but if there's anything you guys want to talk about first, because I'll get kind of ranty. You know how it
I'm
is.
curious what your experience has been like working in the Japanese time zone. Somebody comes from kind of roughly a similar time zone.
Wait, working with a Japanese what?
Working in a Japanese time zone with, I assume you're still working for like some North American companies, maybe. European companies.
It's been weird. I think, but especially with contracting, for example, like, it's easier because as a contractor, right? You're not they don't dictate your hours, right? Because you're a contractor, they're not supposed to. Oftentimes, I just kind of get updates, and there is an overlap in the day in terms of hours and stuff that kind of like overlap with U.S. time and Japan time. So it's not as bad as you might think. I mean, you have to kind of be able to kind of negotiate that, right? So it's not exactly something that's like super easy to kind of like figure out, but it is possible. It is very possible.
I wanted to ask you. You mentioned how you try to pull from your own interests and stuff. It's just a thought that if you don't have that many interests, or they feel difficult to apply, how do you prevent yourself from going to the same references with every project?
Well, there's like, yeah, I mean, the biggest thing would be like, you got to get out more, right? Like, I'll say like that, but it's like a lot of it is, like you have first, yeah, like you were saying, you have to have interests to kind of do this. But then two, like, yeah, what happened? Like, let's say because art was the interest, right? Art is the thing that you enjoy doing, and now I don't want to say it was taken away, but it's like it becomes the job now, right? So it can be difficult to like kind of keep going with those interests, for example, like because after like one or two projects, you're like, well, I already used my interest in the last one, right? But there's other aspects to it that I guess, and there's other images, there's other, other facets of that interest that you can start pulling from, and then at the end of the day, like you can reuse references pretty often, especially ones that like you're particularly interested in, because like you might have used it once for one project, right? But just don't use it the same way, and even if you did use it the same way, right? The references that you have with it, right? Because I used this fountain pen already for one of the other projects, but the references that are coming with it this time are very different, right? It's like totally different than what we had last time. So it's like it won't look the same at all. And on top of the fact that the world itself isn't going to be something that's like completely similar either. So it's going to be, you're going to be fine if you use references again and again. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I guess my other interest in my life has just been music. I find it very hard to apply it because music is so independent. Like it's very recognizable, but it's also abstract. When you're making this project idea, you necessarily want everything to be musically associated,
Yeah, I mean that's
my main interest, but I don't want to keep applying it to like a wastelandy sky pirate thing.
But there's, I guess for me, right, there's different aspects you can pull. So for example, like we had a project where our reference was like music waves, like like the sound waves that come, not the music, the sound waves that come out that you're not even supposed to see other than like like simulated like models and stuff like that. You know what I'm saying? Like it's very like not easy to like pull from that essentially. Like it's definitely all abstract, but that's the cool thing, right? Because music has a bunch of different instruments to it, has a bunch of different mentalities, and you can use it in varying proportions, right? Because you can use it as the entire, or as a main kind of big shape. You can also use it as the extra, where it's like, there's a little bit of something to that, like that'd be, it's kind of there, and it's up to you as the designer to kind of like pull all those things together and decide. And at the end of the day, also, you can pick other references, right? Maybe think about like games that you've played, think about IPs that you've experienced. You're like, well, that's kind of cool. Like I really like, I don't know, Magic, like, or I really like, this idea or whatever. And then you kind of just start pulling things from that, it can, after a while, it does kind of start getting like, to be a lot, but not a lot. It can start getting repetitive, but that's up to you as the designer to kind of make sure that you don't, you know what I'm saying?
When you say that you can look at other IP, it's like I know that you don't intend to say you put Sonic the Hedgehog as one of your 3 categories, right?
Yeah. So what I mean by like looking at other IPs, you can take what they referenced. So Sonic the Hedgehog, right, is a fast running hedgehog, right? So like, speed, you can take the act of running, or a metal ring, you can do all sorts of stuff, right? Or even the act of like some of their like Sonic the Hedgehog itself, right? Like the game is a platformer, right? There's a path that you need to follow. There's a certain kind of idea behind that. And so you don't have to pull from, like, you're not pulling from the physical shapes that you're seeing from Sonic. You're pulling from the references that they probably pulled from, like roller coasters, like, like the act of running and, various things like that to kind of make this, I don't know, something. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, because I've had lots of interest with their things like entertainment and creative tasks, physical things. All of my interests have been, feels like, creative, intellectual stuff, like writing, music, producing. It's kind of. I don't necessarily have like an interest in cars or coffee like some people might.
Well, I mean, because they can also be abstract ideas as well, right? Like the act of writing, right? That, like, the writing can be a reference, even though it's like, there's the physical aspect, like pen and paper, right? But there's also the idea of like story making. There's the idea of like the creation of worlds, right? And I know you're world building right now, but the idea of creating a world could be a reference in itself, right? Like anything could be a reference, but you just have to you have to just kind of look at the ideas and pull keywords from it and see like, how can I influence my project with that, And it doesn't have to be a main design aspect. It can be the smallest little thing that you can think of, but the whole point is, you're pulling from it in a, you're trying to pull whatever you can to help influence your world. You know what I'm saying?
So you can list in one of your design categories something more like an abstract idea.
Oh yeah, totally. Like death. There's no like actual. There's not a physical shape to that, right? But you could still use it. You could just pull from it and see what happens. Sometimes you're going to have success doing that. Sometimes you won't. But that's what this ideation process is about. You're trying to discover that. You're trying to figure out like what references work best together and what don't,
Yes. For my project, I've written a comic book story.
Uh-huh.
Like I really wrote it. It's something like 90, 100 pages long. So it's a full scripted story. I've gotten feedback from friends. It's what I want to do with my thing going forward. So one of the things that I kind of fell into is that I've written out the story and how I kind of come up with generic representations of what I want to happen. We go to this wasteland place and there's sky pirates. And so now I'm trying to interject the creativity into it. Mm-hmm. But I've already, kind of established, kind of like how you make your blue sky keyframes and you kind of know what you want already, and then you have to go design for it.
Mm-hmm.
I was wondering, like, you mentioned that the pirates and wasteland and question are not necessarily design components
Yeah.
because there's something that I am designing for.
Yeah.
But could I not make pirates a design component? Like things can.
Yeah, but that's the whole thing, right? Pirates is a reference. Sky Pirates is not, right? Sky Pirates is what you're actually designing, what they're actually going to become. So you don't want the actual object, the actual thing to be. That's why, like in my reference board, I don't have Gifu Japan, because I don't want my reference board to incorporate, like I don't want the form language of the actual place to be influencing what the place is supposed to feel like. You know what I'm saying? Like, you don't want to use, like, if you're trying to make something creative, right? If you're trying to make a new ingredient, you don't want to add the same ingredient, right? You want to add different flavors to make this dish kind of work, right? So if you just, if you have water and you add water to it, it's just water, right? It's just the same thing. So with your Sky Pirate idea, if that's the IP that you're going for, you can design, like, what is the design of the Sky Pirates? You can have pirates as part of the board, but Sky Pirates is a design idea that could be anything. You can, because you can take the idea of World War II planes, right? And that could be that plus pirates, right? And that's one thing. But you can also do, I don't know, like windmills plus pirates. What does that look like? Or even even coral. Like, you can take something that's not in the sky, right? It has nothing to do with the sky, and apply that to Sky Pirates. What does that look like? Because you're designing for Sky Pirates, not using them as a reference. Does that make sense?
Okay, so yeah, having a pirate as a design language is not something for the greater world. Like, if I wanted that kind of
pirates can be part of the greater world. Pirates can be part of that design language, right? Where, like, one of the, because pirates exist, that's an actual reference, so you can actually, put that as a big, medium, or small, and you can have them like mostly pirates where it's big. I probably wouldn't, because if it's going to be Sky Pirate, it's going to feel like pirates regardless. So you want some other reference to kind of dominate that, right? So you can put that as like small, and then you can have something else, in your reference board that helps define what that look is, because if you had, like a bird, like a crow, for example, I don't know, like crow plus pirates equals, and then your Sky Pirate, right? That's like the most basic version of it. And then you can add another reference to that and make that a little more unique, right? It's, crow plus, I don't know, the vegetable. I don't know. You know what I'm saying?
I imagine you could use this as an excuse to explore a new interest too, if you wanted to.
New what?
It's a new interest.
Oh, yeah.
I imagine the more you know about something, the better it's going to be, of course. But, like, I don't know much about martial arts, but I've started playing fighting games recently, and it'll be something I'm interested in learning more about.
Hell yeah. What are you playing?
Maybe I'll do something related to that.
Nice. Yeah, that's exactly it. I think it's funny. I was working on Mouse Guard a couple years back. Unfortunately, got canceled, but still worked on it, I guess. But there was this kind of like we were doing a lot of weapon designs, and so to understand how weapons are made, right? I started looking up weapon videos, and then watching blacksmithing videos, right? Because you're watching how a weapon's made. And then, like, I was like, that's pretty cool. And then I took a blacksmithing class. I'm like, dude, this shit is sick, And it's like, it just kind of goes from there, But you got to be open to it, And I think that's exactly right. It's you can use these references to kind of inspire new hobbies, right? Because that's the thing about being an artist, right? We spend so much time as students trying to become an artist. And then when you become an artist, you kind of need to start trying to become other things, because if you don't, it's just boring. You're not really including much. You're not bringing much to the table because you don't have much to bring to the table. You know what I mean? I think I've said it before, maybe not here in particular, but a lot of artists, I mean, me included. I'm not saying that this didn't happen to me. It's like you kind of become a shell of who you were, right? When we as people, right? Like most of us, when we start, like when we're kind of just growing up, we're doing things, right? We're just going around, we're just having fun, right? And then like when we decide, we're like, hey, I'm going to become an artist, and you drop everything, right? And you're like, I don't have time for my old friends. I don't have time for this. I don't have time for that. And then you just like do art, right? Because that's, I mean, what good or bad, it happens, right? We can't deny that is a thing, right? But you have to remember, like the thing that makes you unique are your lived experiences. If you're not living experiences, you're not unique, right? You're just pulling things that everyone else is pulling from. And that's, something that we all, have to understand. The better I become, the better of an artist I become, the less I'm actually doing art. I've noticed that the more I kind of sit down and just like crank away at art all day, the worse I get. It sounds funny, but it's just like, I'm just not like, you just don't have interests. And then if you don't have interests, you're not an interesting person, and non-interesting people don't create good work, because it's not interesting. No one cares because it's not personal, it's kind of harsh to say it that way, but you know what I mean? It's like, it's an extreme way to say it, but that's really what it is. Your lived experiences is what makes you a unique artist, right? Your vision, your thought process, your understanding of the world. And if you're not somebody that experiences these things, chances are, you're not really able to contribute very well to a lot of these conversations of design, just because you don't do much. You know what I'm saying? Well, what game are you playing, dude? What fighting game? Tell me a Street Fighter.
Oh yeah, Street Fighter 6.
Yeah.
Pretty much my first fighting game.
Nice. First one?
Sick. Yeah, but I was playing a bunch of Samurai Showdown last night, so that was fun.
Oh, sick. I'm waiting for my my PS5 to come in, because I shipped that over, so I'm still waiting for it. I've been like frothing at the mouth. Because I wanted to play, so I was playing 6 for a little bit. Like when I got it, I was playing a little bit, but I got really busy, and then I was trying to play it more, and then we moved, and then I'm just waiting for my PS5 now. So, but yeah, but I started on Third Strike though, so that's kind of where I like to play the most.
All right, well, you'll probably destroy me, but
No.
sometime I'm down.
Not at all. Cool. Oh, so I did have some things I want to talk about. So I was having a conversation with one of my friends, and we were talking about getting hired. We were talking about just the shit process that it really is to like apply for jobs. For most of you here know what I'm talking about. And I just like, we were like going off. We were just like, it's the dumbest thing ever. Like, a lot of it is just a bunch of people that are in positions of power, like acting like they're like, so much better. You know what I mean? I don't know. It's very infuriating. So like something that I don't know how to change it. I'm just ranting because I can. But like, how many of you have ever gone to an interview, right? And they go, how many titles have you shipped? Because it matters to them, which I don't know who I need to say this to. I don't know who needs to hear this, but it doesn't fucking matter. It doesn't, unless you're an art director or somebody that like, maybe lead, but mostly art director and higher. Unless you're one of them, as a standard artist, it doesn't matter how many products you've shipped. Like meaning you were there for most of the life of creating that game. You know what I'm saying? Because there's this weird standard that that people are, I don't know, making, developing, or like, but it's saying it's a lot of like, because you'll sit down and interview and they'll be like, oh yeah, so it looks like you've had, this amount of experience. Cool. How many titles have you shipped? And then, like if you didn't work, let's say you're a contractor, right? And you've worked on like 50 titles, right? Like my resume has, like a ton of titles on it. I didn't ship any of them, right? Because they hire you on for a certain amount of time, whether it's 2 weeks or 6 months, right? And then that's it, right? And there's this like, I don't know, elitism, like when it comes to people like in studio versus like people that are like contracting or freelancing, because it's like it's really weird because they're like, oh, how many titles have you shipped? Well, I worked on these like 50, or these 10, these 20 titles. And they're like, oh yeah, but you weren't there the whole time. And in my mind, as an artist that's worked on projects, I have shipped titles before. Not me personally, because that's not how it fucking works. But like, we like they'll ask, they'll say, oh, but you didn't ship those. It's like, yeah, but neither did you, because at the end of the day, it's like you just get your assignment. Like you have an art director, right? And they just go, hey, can you design a building for me? Regardless of like whether you're in-house or a contractor, you know what I'm saying? It's very odd. It's very weird that that's a standard that they kind of measure you on, just because like they always jump to that question of like, hey, how many titles have you shipped? And I'm like, I don't know, man. Like it's either like 2 or like 50, right? I don't know. What's your standard? What's your measurements? Because at the end of the day, it's like none of that actually matters, because if you're not a lead, right, you did not physically like, grab the whole game and like program it from scratch and then like drive everything, and it's I don't know, it's getting worse. I feel like a lot of it now is like, because before I've had interviews and they'd be like, oh, how many titles have you shipped? And then, I'll be like, I mean, I worked on these as a contractor. Oh, yeah, it's basically the same thing, right? Because, they're hiring you as an artist for, for a job, right? And really there's no difference between like you working on a title like that, like shipping a title versus, I guess like actually being there for the duration of that project. You know what I'm saying? Because I've been on projects for the duration of a title, right? And literally they just give you assignments. Like you have a producer, you have an art director, and they'll be like, hey, can you design this location? Cool, sure, man. Can you design this? And then you know what they say as contractors? You know what they say as freelancers? Hey man, I have this assignment for you. Can you design this building? It's the same shit, and it's so like, it's such a weird metric to kind of judge people by, because I have friends that they're like, hey man, they're having a hard time finding work just because they didn't physically ship the title. And I'm like, well, anybody asking you that question, chances are they didn't ship the title either. Like it's like, yeah, you were part of the team, but you didn't send it out. You know what I mean? You didn't physically deliver it to somebody's door. So what are you talking about? I don't know. I'm just ranting.
A really stupid requirement. It sounds like it's trying to filter out for unicorns, because
oh yeah,
no one's shipping titles in this state of the industry. Games take 5 to 6 years to make, and most people get 2 years into their tenure.
Yeah.
A lot of companies aren't even running contracts that last longer than 18 months. I don't know how anyone would be expected to ship a title. Games get canceled before the release. Movies get canceled before they show. It's ridiculous.
That's exactly it. You're 100% right. It's like, it's like companies will only like there's a lot of companies, for better or for worse, who knows? Like it's not a great way to go about things, I will admit, but it's a law thing as well. They'll hire contractors for about a year, and then they'll let you go because for one, they can't hire. I think there's. I'm not a law expert. Don't quote me on this, but companies can't hire contractors for more than a year if you're doing the same job as somebody that's in-house, essentially, because basically what you're doing is dodging taxes at that point. You're not dodging taxes. You're you know what I mean? Like, you're not paying for the benefits, and you're not getting all that stuff. You're not an actual contractor. You know what I'm saying? So instead of hiring people on like they should be, a lot of companies are just saying, cool, we'll just hire contractors every year, and then your contract will end, and then that's like long-term contract. That's not even like short term or anything like that. And so you get a lot of people that worked on a project for the duration of a year because that's what they were hired on, and then that's the end of that. It's, people get hired for sure, like Sony Santa Monica, and I've heard of places where they'll hire you on, and it's cool, right? But there's a lot of places that don't, and it's very weird because it's like then you get all these questions of like, oh, have you shipped a title? And I'm like, does it matter? It's like I still did the jobs that they told me to do, and the jobs don't change regardless of where you're at. And it's a really weird like dynamic that you kind of encounter as you're trying to find jobs and stuff like that. And it's really annoying. I don't know. We were like heated about it. I was like, this is so dumb because like I'm not in some of these friends' shoes and stuff like that, like when they're kind of going through some of these processes, right? But I have heard that in whenever I was like going looking for jobs and stuff like that, just because it's like it's annoying. It really is. It's because then they're like, and especially like the idea that, okay, so I want to say it like this: if you do this, whatever. If you're somebody that's hiring and you're listening to this, I'm not judging you, but just know that it's about you. Whenever you have a project, and let's say there's like a fantasy project, right? And then like you show them this fantasy project, and then the recruiter or whoever is looking at this project and was like, oh, hey, we're doing sci-fi stuff. Do you have more of that? And you say no, right? They're like, well, we're looking for sci-fi stuff. Let us know. You know what I mean? You are terrible at your job. Just know that, right? If you're a recruiter and you're listening to this, I'm calling you out. Just because it's like, it's funny because I've gone through interviews, right? And I'm sure a majority of you have experienced this, where you'll kind of go on. You go to these meetings, right? You'll like talk to these people, and like the hardest interviews usually aren't the artists. You know what I mean? Like, because whenever you go to an interview like this, generally speaking, you're going to talk to a handful of people, right? You're going to talk to like recruiters. First and foremost, that's usually the first point of contact is the person that contacted you or you applied or whatever. And then you're going to talk to like production people, generally speaking. And then you're going to talk to the art director / leads, whoever those people are. And then you're probably going to talk to the team, the more senior people, like senior level artists, maybe a junior every once in a while, but mostly seniors, right? And then if they like you, they'll hire you, right? The hardest interview is usually the front, because in the beginning, it's all these like dumb questions, like, what's your weakness? Like what's your, like, what's something that you would change, or like, why do you want to work here? It's like, cause you're paying, man. Like, that's why, like, let's be real here. Like, why are you wasting my time with this shit? Sorry, but it's like, yeah, you get these like just terrible questions of like all like, and including like, how many titles have you shipped? Because that's dumb, because it's like, unless you're, like I was saying earlier, unless you're a lead, it doesn't actually matter, because a junior, like if you're a junior artist that happened to stay the whole time and you get to say you shipped a title, it's like, okay, you did the icons, great, man. Like it's not a measure of somebody's worth, essentially, but in those earlier interviews, you get all these like terrible questions, and then the funny thing is, and this is like everybody I've talked to, like it was like this. When you get to the art director, and when you get to whoever's in charge, it's usually like art wise, not like production wise. It's always so easy. It's always like so chill. Like, oh yeah, you know, they like the work, and then we're just chatting. Like I've had interviews where, because sometimes like the way they used to do it before pre COVID, they would like call you in and you go to a meeting, and then you'd like interview with like, you know, like 4 or 5 sets of people, right? And it's just an all day thing. So you're just sitting in a room, and then, you know, the teams come in, various groups of people. And I've had, you know, interviews with like, you know, production and this and that, and just basically like non-art people. And it's like the hardest, weirdest questions you'll hear, you know? And then you'll meet the art director, and they're like so chill. Like they'll like look at your work, like they'll just look at, like, whether it's on an iPad or a book, they'll just open it. They'll look at 1 or 2 pages and close it and go, cool, thanks, man, and walk out, you know? And in your mind, you're like, did I just tank that? Did I just mess that up, you know? And more often than not, they're like, oh yeah, no, it looked good, you know? But you'll get from like recruiters or various things like that where they're like, oh, we're looking for like sci-fi, and you're really only showing fantasy work. And it's like, you don't think I can apply this shit to like a normal sci-fi thing? You know what I'm saying? Like, yes, that does happen in a junior setting, right? Absolutely, it happens. But when you're talking about like senior level artists, that doesn't happen. It's just like, well, for one, if you're talking to senior level artists, they probably have what they need anyway, right? But you know, they're like, oh, you don't have enough sci-fi for us, you know, or you don't have enough of this, and it's so stupid. It's like some of the worst thing. If anybody here ever becomes a recruiter, please just stop it. Just don't do that stuff. It's just it wastes so much time, and it's like, it's so dumb. I don't know. Sorry, I'm ranting pretty hard, but you know, it's like because like these people, they like control the way your life's going. You know what I mean? Like, because a lot of people here, it's like, it's more often than not, it's not that they can't do it, it's just they didn't, right? It's like they're just looking for work, and you know, they just happen to put their eggs in a sci-fi project, you know, and it's whatever, you know what I mean? It is what it is. And then, you know, they'll like actively kind of go with somebody else on that, and it's so like, I don't know, it's such a bad experience as people, like for people finding work, that I just wanted to talk about that. I don't know how you guys feel about it. Maybe I'm the only one that hates this shit, but it's dumb, to say the least.
Yeah, I had the same experience.
What was that, Alex? Sorry, you're kind of quiet.
I had the same experience, and it was dumb. I was a joint interview with an art director and then the HR person. And the art director would be trying to ask me about techniques or skill sets that I had, and then the next follow-up question would be, can you tell us about a time where you experienced a problem and you had to use your skill management to solve or come out the other end with it?
Yeah.
You know, it's just, I'm sure it's a decent enough question, but it's just in the moment you broke up the flow of conversation for something unrelated and generic.
Yeah.
It was very frustrating. And I said, well, yeah, I talked with a coworker and came to an agreement.
Yeah. I figured it out.
Yeah.
It's so like, yeah, because it happens a lot. Like, I've had, you know, the questions where like, oh, if a coworker gives you a note and then your lead gives you a note, you know, whose advice do you take? It's like, I take my boss's notes. You know what I mean? Like, what are you talking about, man? It's the dumbest thing I've ever, like, and those are easy to answer. But you have to like word it in a cool way where it's like, you know, I like try to balance what they're saying because they're, you know what I mean? You have to say it in this like weird, you know, stupid way. And it's like, it's such a waste of time. Like, come up with better questions, right? Because I have to fucking make this whole portfolio, right? I have to I have to take 6 months of my life, right? I have to, like, suffer for this body of work, right? For you to ask me this just dumb question that you Googled before the interview. You know what I mean? And I think for me, it's just the lack of, like, respect and the lack of, I don't know, common sense when it comes to a lot of this stuff. And maybe there's some people out there that answer it badly. I get that, but I think more often than not, it's just like, you're coming at me with these dumb questions. It's like I don't know. And more often than not, most of the time, it's usually not an artist that's asking you these things, because usually an artist will know kind of what questions to ask. Like, I think because I had an interview with one of my art directors. I did land the job, and he literally walks in, and he goes, "Oh, what kind of sci-fi do you like?" And he goes, "Why?" Like, he just asked, like, he's like, "What kind of sci-fi?" So I just named, like, the kind of movie, the kind of thing. And then he goes, "Why?" And then I said, "Why?" He's like, "Cool. Thanks, man." And then he like left. He's just like, "Cool, I'm good. I gotta go to a meeting. See you, dude." And I was like, it was so chill. But it was like, but all the other meetings, it was just so, like, mind numbing, and it's just a waste, because then you'll go through, like, like 10 of these meetings. I think, like, Riot has like 10 meetings you have to go through. Don't quote me on that, but, like, there's a whole bunch. And then all of a sudden they can still say no to you, right? And it's like, if you don't know about, like, the third meeting, if you like this candidate or not, you're probably pretty bad at your job. Like, it's just so, like, I don't know. Sorry, I'm getting kind of ranty. Sorry, but yes, that's what I do.
It's part of the unicorn searching culture Silicon Valley built.
Yeah.
They don't want to train anybody. They want the perfect candidate because everyone wants a job. And they're gonna, create fake, scarcity, and make you fight for it. And they find the exact perfect candidate that meets every specification without any extra work.
Yeah.
I think, can y'all hear me? I'm talking kind of quiet.
Yeah.
I think the really good art directors, they pretty much already know whether they like you or not before they even talk to you.
Mm-hmm.
They might ask you, like, one or two specific questions. But one interview I did with a guy, this didn't work out, but he said, "I already know you can do this. There's this, and this. So what about this, and what about this?" Just two questions about your availability, basically,
Yeah.
So I actually talked to one of Adam Hawk's art directors this week, and he didn't ask any questions. He just said, "What's your rate, and what are you available for? Love your work. As soon as something comes up, we'll work together." I was like, well, that was simple.
Yeah, it's like, because they know what they're doing, and it's like, dude, like, because it's not that the opinions don't matter, because they do get to weigh in on the hiring as a whole, but, like, the weight for the other interviews don't really matter as much, right? Like, they have a say for sure. They can actively stop you from getting hired, but a lot of it really is like, if the art director says they like you, you're probably getting picked up, unless you, like, truly offended, whoever this other person is. More often than not, it's a lot of, like, if you can do the work and you seem like a cool guy, right? Because that's what the interview is. Because if you're in the door, at least for after the first couple interviews, they're just trying to get a personality gauge, and they're trying to ask some questions that they might have had during looking at your portfolio. Because, they're like, "Oh, hey, I saw that you do a lot of vehicles, can you do architecture?" I don't know, something. They might ask you something very particular to whatever project they currently need, right? Because, they're like, "Hey, we're working on a city thing. How are your city shots?" Stuff like that. But you're probably already, like, I guess, capable of working for them if you're already that far along in the process, But But yeah, it's, I don't know. It's talking with actual like art director and stuff is great. Talking to anybody else during that process, I don't know. It's like, just stop wasting time. Stop wasting time and people's effort and getting people's hopes up. It's like, I don't know. It's disgusting. Sorry. Hell of a week one, guys. This is what we live for.
If I can't get a job after next year, if I can't keep going, I can probably just figure something else out.
I will say, I think as an artist, like as somebody that like, doing this for a second, I think one of the worst things that can happen is putting like deadlines on yourself. Like obviously there's the need, right? And for not this isn't particular to you. This is for literally anybody. This is because I come across this a lot where, there's only a certain amount of time we have left, right? Capable of learning, right? Because we're not. Maybe some of us are, but a lot of us don't have infinite time / infinite resources. It's the resources that become a problem, right? It's my parents won't cover me anymore / my partner is getting mad at me, whatever it is. Basically, you have a certain amount of time to be learning, right? And I hear this a lot where it's like, hey, I can only be doing this for another 6 months. I have to make a portfolio by then, especially like during my mentorship type things. A lot of it's like, hey, I need to make a portfolio by 6 months. If I don't get something by then, I got to find something else. And I think really, like for me, for the health and sanity for anybody listening / anything else, really, really try not to do that, right? I would say the best thing that you can do is find a way to make your time infinite, right? Like meaning, find a part-time job, find extra income, do something on the side, because you really don't know when something's going to pan out. I know people that have been waiting for literally a decade, 10 years of being a student until now and not finding work, right? And then eventually hopefully finding something. I know people that waited 1 year, right? And it happens, right? It's some people find that a little bit faster than others, right? And it happens. It really, but at the end of the day, what you want to do is you want to find a way to make your time, extend your time as much as possible, right? Because don't let your dream of working in this industry, stop you from being able to provide for yourself and provide for your family, right? Just because, there's more important things than doing art. And on top of that, you can do art for yourself. You can do concepts for yourself. You can do paintings for yourself. And so if you're ever in a situation where it's like, I only have a certain amount of time, reevaluate that. Ask yourself like, hey, can I do something to make it so I have either more time or infinite meaning like you have a part-time job that's stable enough and you have a couple hours, because working 2 or 3 hours every day is better than 0, right? Like, yes, you're not getting the 8 hours, the 10, 15 hours that a normal student is getting, but you don't have that anyway, right? So it's like, there's nothing to worry about, right? Sorry, give me a second. Someone's at my door. Hopefully I don't die. No, I'm just kidding. It's just a package. Be right back. Hold up.
Alex, I kind of missed what you said there, but you said if you didn't get a job after this year, you said you were thinking about pursuing a different field. Is that right?
Yeah, it's just too much. We don't have time.
Mm-hmm.
And got in too early. I'm not good enough to keep up with all tool sets. I can see the writing on the wall. I'm probably not gonna get another job. So
You think that the market is just too, just not in a good place?
it's all right. I mean, I've got jobs. I've got too many jobs, honestly. Like I'm signing up for a third gig just because I need to. But I'm not confident that in a year or two's time, with the current skill sets that I'm maintaining and at the rate that I'm picking up other things, it's just not happening when new students are coming in with unlimited time and working on the stuff that's more in demand. That I'm outdated before I even really started, and working is taking up too much time for me to focus on keeping up to date. And
Yeah.
I'm not finding that the jobs are paying off in a way that helps me stay up to date either. It's more applying what you know rather than being able to learn something new and really specific tasks.
Sorry about that.
Don't have you go through the ringer on a full project the way that students do every 3 months.
Right. And what you said about the money thing is really true, because I think my whole family's in the music industry, and there's a lot of actual space in the music industry on the low end, in the sense that there's a lot of jobs you can work, but you're scraping, you know what I mean? So when a company like Adam Hawk asked me my rate, there's that moment of like, well, I really should aim this low because I could need that gig. And I know that they hire a lot of entry-level artists. And so, yeah, with a lot of jobs, I think it's going to get harder to scale and harder to say, okay, this is my rate now, and take it or leave it, I think it's more likely in the future that they'll just say, okay, fine, we'll go find somebody else. And so that's going to be hard, because we're both at entry level, right? With fairly low expenses. Our kids aren't in school. But we do have families, and like those expenses are coming around the corner, and you do the math on what expenses are gonna be in 5 years, and you're like, this had better scale,
Right, exactly. So I'm just mentally preparing myself to say, well, that was fun, but 6 years of ignoring everything, like Kenny said, it's absolutely true. We have no support network in Kansas City, no hobbies. We don't do things. We can't afford to do things. So, like, just how much are we gonna keep going through this if it's gonna be a struggle for the foreseeable future all the time? It's like Kenny has said it before that when you're a student, the only thing you can think about is becoming a professional, and then when you're a professional, you really need time to be a student, and you just throw so many other factors into it.
Yeah, I mean, I missed the first part of the conversation, but I think like my mindset has changed over the years of like, I guess how to like kind of pursue topics like this, right? Because before, when I first started, it was like freaking pedal to the ground, just go, things kind of sort themselves out, blah blah this and that, right? But that's not the case. We can't rely on that. We can't. I guess not everyone can do that, and it's not even healthy to do that, right? And I think for me now, like I'm coming to this mentality of like, really, learning figuring out how to take care of yourself first, right? Because it's like, because this career path for everybody, right? It's not something that is like, you can just, waltz into and then by the end of it, like you're like, oh, I put my mind to it and cool, you know what I mean? Like I got it, you know what I mean? Because you can have every intention, you can do as many hours, if not more than others, and still not get it, right? Because something that a lot of people don't like to hear is that it's luck. A lot of it really is. There is skill involved. There's absolute skill involved. But that skill means nothing if you did not come across the right project, if you came across the project too late, you're not in the same style as the project, or if you don't even know people that are on that project, right? Because yes, skill is a factor in the sense that you do need to be able to draw, you need to be able to paint to make something happen, right? But it doesn't matter because there's probably a million projects that I was a good fit for, but maybe I wasn't good enough at the time and I am now, or or my name was just at the bottom of the list because I didn't apply on time or whatever it was. There's so many different factors to it, and so whenever I'm telling people like find work, like not concept work, like anything, like a coffee shop, like working at a grocery store, working at whatever, just do something, because now you have time to wait. You can wait it out, and you don't have to take those shit jobs that are like, hey man, here's $10, can you do a matte painting for me? Because at the beginning it's always like, I need experience, I need to do something because I'm nobody, and I need I need that resume, right? I'm not saying people don't do matte painting for $10, but it is something where that happens a lot, where you're forced to take a bad deal just because you don't have any other options, because you don't know when the next one's coming, and that one on your resume is gonna look better than nothing, essentially, right? That's usually the mindset. But I think that's where the mindset needs to shift, where it's it's not really about dropping everything for a duration of time, being like, oh, I have to drop everything to pursue this, right? For me, it's you really, what you should be doing is just continuing your life, right? And then squeezing in some hours whenever you can to try and make this work, where it's like, oh, I have some weekends, I have some nights to kind of do some stuff, so let me kind of do that. And that's usually a better recipe, just because for one, yeah, you're getting less hours drawing and painting, right? But they're better hours, right? Like, you're healthier because of it, because you're not dropping your entire life. Your family probably is a little more patient with you, this and that. There's a lot of different things that can cause you to break, rather than that's not related to getting work, right? Because a lot of times, people's relationships crumble, people's lives just shatter, just because they're trying to like do this thing, and that's not because yeah, you might land the job, but if everything you had before is gone, what's the point, right? I don't say it like that, but you know what I'm saying. It's something where the mindset needs to shift, right? That's the hustle and grind mentality doesn't. I don't want to say it doesn't work. It's not that it does or doesn't. It's more of like if it does work, great. At what cost? You know what I'm saying? Sorry, my package came. Dude, I had 10 minutes, man. I was like, so something weird that I've actually encountered in Japan is that they won't just leave your package at the door. They will leave. Like, they will not deliver your package. Maybe it's just the way I'm doing it now. I don't know. Who knows? But they won't leave it at the door, so I have to go get it. And I was thinking the whole time, I was like, dude, don't come during my stream. It's because the doorbell's really loud. I don't want to get up, this and that. And I was like, 10 minutes, perfect. It's great. Like, we made it. And all of a sudden, ding dong. I was like, damn it. But whatever. It's not a huge deal. You guys are cool though, right? It's just some drawers for my closet. This one looks dumb.
I hope you're doing well, man. I know I have not been on the streams a lot. I've been really busy, and I don't think we've even really spoken since you've been in Japan. But I hope you're settling in well. And I'm sure you've gone over all that 1,000 times on the stream, so no need to repeat it here. But
no, thanks, dude. No, it's been good. I saw I've been, and for everybody else, like for everybody, I have been getting some messages here and there about things. I'm trying to get to them. I have like a list of people that I'm trying to like respond to. So definitely, if anybody has sent me a message in this past 2 months, just know I'm gonna get to it. Because I know, Jacob, you were one of them. I do need to get back to you on that. But yeah, I appreciate it, man.
Oh, all good, bro. I know how busy you are. No problem at all.
But it's good being busy. I'm glad. Like it sounds good though. It sounds like it's like a good busy, right?
Oh yeah, really good busy.
Nice.
I've had a lot of work coming in. it's all freelance stuff, and I think a lot of people got laid off, those companies maybe still have needs,
Oh yeah.
but they don't want to fulfill them with a full-time job, so they're like, well, we'll just contract it. I'm not sure, but a lot of it's been indie stuff. Things have been better for me than they've ever been. I invoiced for more work this month than I've ever invoiced for, so yeah, things
Nice.
are going good.
Dude, hell yeah, man. See, I think that's the thing too, good or bad, right? Being on both sides of that, right? Being somebody that has worked in studio, but also somebody that does contract. This even the like because like this past um, this apocalypse that's been happening in the industry, to say at least. Uh, it's been it's been good and bad, right? Bad is in, yeah, a lot of people are getting let go, a lot of things happening, the things we've been talking about, absolutely. But uh, companies, something to understand is companies still need that work to get done. They're still doing stuff, right? And so that is really shifted, right, to a lot of contracting work. And I'm seeing that a lot lately where like a lot of my in-house friends that are like working in-house, they're not, there's a lot more scares, a lot more let goes, this and that. But the people that are contracting that I know, they're all doing really well. They're all like kind of, I guess, able to kind of to pick up work, which is interesting, right? And that's just because the dynamic is shifting. And I think that's something that's been happening a lot these past couple years is a big dynamic shift that's going on. And we kind of need to understand what that is. And I think like it's really, I don't know, it's very like it's very interesting right now to kind of see like where companies are going for things and what are they doing and this and that. So just understand that for everybody else, right? Like it's not just like things are looking kind of grim in some areas, but it's also bright in others, right? And you have to kind of adapt. You kind of have to know that it's not just it's being, I guess, flexible about some of these ideas, because a lot of times, like some people they don't want to work, in animation, or they don't want to work in games, they don't want to work in theme parks or whatever. Like they don't want to work in the other thing that they weren't aiming for. And sometimes like with the cool thing about being a contractor is that when one industry kind of dips, right, with animations getting slow or games getting kind of slow, movies are picking up or theme parks are picking up, and you're kind of like bouncing around, right? And this is where a lot of students don't have to worry about this yet, just because they're not in a phase in their career to worry about that yet. But for those of you that are starting to work and are finding work, this is kind of where you create longevity in your career, because oftentimes, once we get the job, no one talks about it anymore, right? Because you're off getting paid. So why the hell does this matter, right? Because you don't need to talk about it anymore, right? Because you're getting paid. So one of the bigger things that a lot of us, when you start hitting, like maybe not your first job, but you're like, getting your second, third, fourth job, right? You're kind of like, you're progressing. Things are more comfortable. It's starting to figure out, how do you create longevity for yourself? Because there's going to be times just like this again. I'd venture to say in another 5 years, right? Every 5 to 10 years, there's some other thing that happens, right? Whether it's an economy or whether it's whatever it is, there's always going to be something. And so as you're developing, right, trying to figure out like, hey, how do I keep finding work? And that can come in a couple different forms, where the work that you show, right? The types of work that you're showing, from like, oh, I can do realistic to stylized. So cool, you can work in multiple studios, right? Because the more styles you work in, the more studios can hire you. The more industries that you can work in, even more studios can hire you, right? Just because you work in games doesn't mean you understand theme parks, so they might not hire you for that. But if you've done theme park work, that's a whole other industry, right? Marketing art and illustration, stuff like that, whatever, right? Or even like interior designing, right? Where people need designs for interiors. And it's not like some cool epic environment. It's like a lobby, Concept artists do that. And the better you get, right? The more work you start getting, you got to start looking at those other avenues, because during times like this is where those things become important, right? And you need to set that up now, because, you know, if you don't have it when it happens, you end up on your ass, right? It's like, you know, I have a lot of friends, like, because my group of people that I was kind of like in school with, we've all been working since at least like 2018 is kind of when a majority of us were finally working. Like I was working a little bit before that, but like, you know, majority of my classmates, you know, we're all kind of working around that time. And a big thing happened where some of us, you know, got into bigger studios and we kind of just, you know, stayed there. And some of us bounced around and, you know, kind of went studio to studio, right? And some of us did freelance, some of us did, you know, in-house, whatever. And the people that kind of kept growing their skill set, improving the amount of things they know, and applying their skills to other industries are the ones that are doing the best now, right? But for the people that just kind of like stayed at one place and like never moved, never changed, there's nothing wrong with that at the time. It's times like this is when it matters, right? Because whenever everything's good, it's very odd to want to mess that up. You know what I'm saying? Like when you have a high paying job and you're doing what you need to do, like you don't want to leave a studio, not if you don't have to, right? And it sounds very odd, but the ability to find more jobs, find more studios, get more contacts, so on and so forth, get more work under your belt, right? That skill is invaluable, right? That's going to create longevity. You're going to be able to find jobs consistently, even in times that are super tough, because you have the resume to back you up, right? But if you have one studio under you and that project got canceled, you might not even be able to show it. And now you're 6-7 years into a career and you're somebody that doesn't even have, a professional portfolio to show, because the thing that you've been working on for the last 5 years you're not even allowed to show it. You know what I'm saying? So it's just these things, and as you're kind of progressing through your careers, you just kind of want to start figuring out all these little things. Talk to people that are more advanced. Like my first couple of years, I was just having conversations with people, asking them what they did and this and that, and like trying to figure out what those next steps are, because oftentimes the first step for us, right, is finding a job, but we don't try and progress that. We don't try to add to that because, I did it. I got my first job. I'm in. My foot is in the door, right? It's staying in the door that actually is the biggest issue, and finding or having the ability, the longevity to consistently be invited into doors, right? That's what you're looking for a career that's going to last you a while, right? So just things to think about. A lot, if you're like looking for your first job, right? Like, keep doing that. Like keep going that way. Just keep doing those things. But for those of you that are like starting to find work, or you're even like landing your first job and stuff like that, just know that you're not done. You have to keep like adding to that somehow, because that's what's actually going to keep you afloat in times of like hardship. You know what I'm saying? So, whew. All right.
I just want to say one more thing about that, Kenny.
Yeah.
I think I'm finding for me freelance Randall Mackey I don't know if you know who he is the first person to talk to me about this. He said freelancing can be more stable than full-time, in his opinion, in the sense that if you have a consistent base of 15 clients, if one decides to let you go, the other 15 or the other 14 are potentially still wanting to reach out to you. And that's been true for me. One work with one client completely dried up, and I emailed another one that I hadn't worked with them in like 18 months, and they came back and now they're giving me a ton of work. So just having that ability to bounce around has made me more comfortable. But I also think Alex sounded like he was feeling kind of pessimistic about the future, which really makes me sad. I feel kind of, I guess, a little more optimistic, because I think there's kind of a difference in mentality, and maybe this is something for everybody to think about, where when you work full time versus when you're an entrepreneur. My father has run a company my whole life, so I think that's kind of influenced how I think. But I knew from the very beginning that like there would be no help whatsoever. I was gonna have to grind it out, and you just get used to the idea that it's gonna be hard. I don't know if exactly I'm explaining it right, but you're constantly looking. I've constantly been looking to create my own opportunities, and that's never stopped, and I don't think it ever will. Whereas, some other friends I have, they got laid off and they're just kind of like blindsided, Does that make any sense?
No, totally. And I mean, I feel the exact same way. I think, there's the lack of stability makes you realize that there is no stability, right? Because you have to make it yourself. Like, I think oftentimes, like, I think that's more relevant now more than ever, where they're like, we've had so many people that like worked at like these big studios where they're like, Disney, or worked at Pixar, or worked at wherever, or Riot, right? Riot was one of the big ones where it's like, you work there, you're there for the rest of your life. That was like the mentality behind it, right? I mean, that's how they felt about it. And in my mind, because my parents, they own businesses as well. And I was always kind of, like, I'm not like a doomsday kind of person. Like, I'm more optimistic than that. But there is a certain mentality that I have when it comes to my safety, right? My safety is not provided by anybody, right? Just because, why would they? Because at the end of the day, if you aren't, if you can't expect somebody else to keep your well-being in mind, right? Sometimes if it aligns with what they want, great, right? Because at a studio, your well-being is in their interest. They make money if you do well, right? But when that changes, when some random thing happens and you're inconvenient to have on the books, they're going to let you go. It's not personal. It's just what it is. And I think the thing with a lot of freelancers is that we understand that, right? And we are always preparing for the next thing. We're always jumping from the next thing. And so your skills grow better, and your understanding of the industry as a whole is better, as well as your different avenues, your different paths, right? Like you were saying, where, if one client is finished, right, you've had other clients, so you just go back to that and you email them, say, hey, how you doing? You guys need anything else? Or, or they'll contact you or whatever. And that's exactly what it is, right? Like my I guess life for this past about a year and a half at this point has been just kind of jumping back between like maybe 10 different clients that I've had before. Nobody, or whether it's like I had before or people I've worked with, right? And it's literally just, oh yeah, we just remembered you from this, we have some work. And then like that first, because if you only have one client you've ever worked with, every 4 to 5 years, they'll contact you again, because that's the phase that they used you in. So that's when they're going to call you, right? Because I had a client from Warner Brothers. They hit me up 2020. I don't know. I think it might have been late 2019, early 2020. I did some stuff for them. And then they're like, great, cool, thank you so much. And then we parted ways or whatever, right? The contract was done. And then they're like, oh yeah, we loved your stuff. And then they contacted me again like last year, was it last year? No, it might have been earlier this year. But like it's 2024 right now. It's been 4 years, and it's literally the next time they had another project to do, right? Because they're always doing other stuff. And because that's just reality. The cycle of a project is a couple years. And then when they call you for freelance for Blue Sky Development, they're going to call you for Blue Sky Development again when that happens. But you have to build up enough clients to where you're constantly kind of cycling through, right? Because, every couple of years they'll call you if you do well. And that's really what it is. But with a lot of in-house people, or a lot of people that are like kind of don't really have to experience that, they don't prepare for things like that. And then whenever a big let go happens, like what's going on right now, they're not prepared, and it hurts bad, right? Because Disney told me that I was gonna be under their wing. They told me that everything was good and we had a project. Everything tells you that I have work for the next 3 years. right? Because if I'm hired on in a game, hired on for a movie or whatever, right? You have your duration of your contract, and you know this, but projects get canceled all the time. Things happen, and you have to kind of be prepared for that. And if you're not, that's the difference between being employed and being unemployed when stuff like this happens. It's not anybody's fault, but relying on somebody else for your well-being is probably one of the worst things that you can do in an industry like ours, especially with that being shown this past year or two, where every studio is letting go of some percent of people, and hopefully you're not one of them, but it will happen eventually. You just don't know when. So having an emergency fund, right? Having money set aside to keep you alive for a year, a comfortable year, not like a scrounging by kind of year, and then having contacts, friends. I think a lot of it's like, you kind of go to school with people, your best friends. In the beginning, you're always like recommending people things, and you're like, hey, there's some work over here. You want to help this out or whatever, right? The beginning is always like that. In the end, once everyone's comfortable, they stop talking, right? And they don't check in until they don't have work, and that's the worst time to check in, because now it seems like you only call me if you need something. You know what I'm saying? That's the kind of thing that you don't want to do. Stay in contact with these people. Hang out, actually be a person, because this is your longevity in the career, right? Don't think of it that way. Obviously, be a cool person, but that's what it is, right? And yeah, there's arguments where the industry shouldn't be like that, right? Where it'd be better if it wasn't, but that's not the industry that we're in, So, but yeah, no, great points, Jacob. Really, really good points. Sorry, I kind of went off on that one. Cool. All right, guys. So we are 18 minutes over, but I just kind of want to talk about this. So I kind of kept it chill today, right? I was just making shapes. I don't know what I'm actually doing, right? I made a pillar. I made like a big kind of like central kind of building. I made like a smaller building. I made like some sort of like, I was thinking like some sort of like center, kind of like city center type of, I don't want to say art display, but something kind of cool. And then like some other like 2-story buildings or 3-story buildings, right? And I'm just making shapes, right? And what I'm going to do is continue this for a while, right? Obviously off stream, but I'm just going to make shapes. They can look like trash, they can look like nothing, but they can also be something, right? Because any one of these, if I was like, hey, I need to actually turn this into a project, turn this into a thing, you just clean it up, make it a thing, right? But explore, right? Have fun. Make a reference board, organize it. We spent the first hour just talking about like what the hell this even is, right? Just understand that these references that we're seeing is what's truly important, right? Understanding and organizing, right? There's nothing wrong with peer ref, just most students don't know how to use it effectively, right? Organizing your images in an appealing way is not actually organizing your images, right? Just because you shoved all the stuff in the closet and your living room's clean doesn't mean you're actually organized, right? So understand what that is, and just kind of have fun with it. So for those in the Livestream Plus, you still have this week to sign up. So for anybody that hasn't joined and you would like to be a part of it, please join in the Discord shop. You can join the Livestream Plus role and be a part of that. We do weekly feedback. It's direct feedback, so your work, whatever you're doing, and we do it the day before. So in this case, it's Wednesday, so we're gonna do it Tuesdays. Is it Wednesday? Yes, Wednesday. We're gonna do it Tuesdays at the same time. Well, 30 minutes later, but generally the same time. And we'll be doing feedback there. So next Tuesday is that private stream. So if you're part of that, you can definitely join that. But yeah. So this is gonna be cool. There's a whole bunch of people in there right now. There's like I think 20, 25 or something like that. It's usually a good time. I do enjoy seeing the projects and like seeing the stuff that people make. I think is really cool. So if you're not taking a class, or if you have if you want to do some portfolio work, it's a really good time to do that. By the end of the 4 weeks, we're hoping to have a good environment piece. So this isn't like just a bunch of exercises to kind of hopefully understand something. This turns into stuff, right? Just like what we've been doing these past couple months of the live stream. You know, these scribbles, random marks, hopefully will be something. You know, so. But yeah, so, you know, thanks for hanging out. Thanks for listening to my rants. If you guys have any questions, hit me up. You know, you can ask me in the Discord. You can post it in the YouTube comments or whatever it is. But yeah, I just appreciate you guys hanging out and listening to my rants. Cool. So that in mind, that's all I got for you today. So next week, we're going to be taking these images or taking these shapes and designs, turning them actually into something. Right now, make a cool shape. Next week, actually making sense of that shape, right? So with that in mind, guys, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next week. So peace.
Thanks so much, Kenny.